Oh my gosh. Ah! Well, it's such a pleasure to be here tonight, you guys. My name is Gail Kolbeck, and I work with Jessica at Fairview, and I spent a chunk of my life as a single mom. And so Jess and I have had some really beautiful and heartfelt conversations about lots of different things, the challenges and things that we go through in life. And one of the things we were talking about a couple weeks ago was we were talking a little bit about anger and forgiveness and some of those things. And then she was like, would you come talk to my friends? And I said, oh my gosh, I would be so honored to do that. So maybe before we get started, I can give you just a little background about me so you kind of understand the perspective and maybe a little bit about my trials and tribulations. It might help just knowing that I've probably walked in some of your shoes before. So I'm not standing up here like some know-it-all who just copied all this stuff out of a book and is reading it to you. I grew up here in Springfield. I've lived here my whole life. And I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional home. We had a lot of money and there was a whole lot of emotional abuse and alcoholism. And so I spent a lot of time in my head by myself growing up, and had brothers and sisters as well. But, and I had a tremendous amount of anxiety growing up as well. And so naturally, as I gravitated into middle school and high school, I turned to less than what we would call adaptive coping mechanisms. I started using alcohol regularly to just try and deal with my life, right? With all the things that I was afraid of and dealing with, and having parents who were physically present but not emotionally present. And that kind of laid the groundwork, unfortunately, for a lot of the difficulties in my life. I became definitely what you would call a functioning alcoholic. And I was also involved in a lot of very unhealthy relationships as a result of that, and this desire to find value in myself through someone else's eyes, if that makes any sense. And so at the age of 26, I was desperate. I was terrified. I was so sure that this was not the life that God had intended for me. So I checked myself into a treatment facility and I got sober. And in that process also was getting married. Shouldn't do that at the same time, just so you know, going forward. Like, that's a really bad idea. And yeah, for me it was, at least. And really started working on a lot of the issues in my life that were about me. I did end up, my ex-husband and we did get married, and I managed to stay sober for 11 years after that. And we had 2 children together. I have a daughter, Cassidy, who's 26, who's in her final semester of graduate school in clinical psychology, and my son, Peyton, who's 22, and he works at Fairview as a paraprofessional, and he is in college becoming a nurse. So that's their story, right? And then we have really we've had the opportunity to have a lot of healing in our lives. And so my ex-husband and I were married for about 11 years, and it all fell apart. It was pretty awful in the end. We were both incredibly hurt. We both did a lot of things to each other that were out of anger and sadness and grief and acting out, and that continued on for quite a while. Our divorce drug out for a really long time, and unfortunately at times at the expense of our children. So the good news is that through time and healing and cleaning up my side of the street, if you will, like really taking inventory and stock of me and what were my character defects, if you will, and then working to learn how to forgive myself. I was able to sit with my ex-husband many years ago and tell him what I was sorry for in my part in our divorce and on our dysfunctional marriage, and he was able to receive that from me. And today he is a very good friend of mine, someone I would do anything for. Now, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, if you'd have asked me that, I'd have laughed in your face, right? I would have just continued to carry that torch of anger and frustration and focusing on his faults. And because of that, And, you know, I relapsed 11 years sober after our marriage fell apart for about 6 weeks. And a month ago, I celebrated 18 years of continuous sobriety. So I've been sober for almost 29 years of my life. So thank you. It is a very, very important part of my story and how I came to find this deep faith that I have. Sorry, I get a little emotional when I just start to kind of go back over God's grace in my life. And I will tell you, and I believe this for all of you as well, God did not bring us to where we are today to drop us on our booties. He did not. He has beautiful, amazing plans for each and every one of you. To get to those, though, sometimes, guys, we have to do like this digging and this excavating and this work on ourselves, because in the end, it is between us and our God, not us and what that person did or how he did this to me. Because believe me, for a long time when Patrick and I split up, and our divorce was very ugly in the beginning and very expensive, and it was all about ego and power and winning instead of about Cassidy and Peyton and what was best and right for them. We were both so damaged by what we had done to each other that we could not see beyond that, if that makes any sense at all. And I recognize that not everybody who's sitting here, you know, maybe is married or has, I mean, I know you're not married, but I mean, was married or maybe going through a divorce, or maybe you're just trying to co-parent with someone. You know, it's all the same thing in my mind. You know, you're partnering with someone to raise your children. And so through my ongoing work with a therapist, and I'm pretty active in the recovery community here in Springfield and working with other women, you know, who are also trying to better themselves. My recovery led me to a deep and abiding faith. I always believed that God brought me here for a reason. I believed that even before I got sober, because I had done so many things wrong. There as so many times I got behind the wheel drunk, put myself in incredibly difficult situations that I should have been dead. I can't believe so many times how I survived all of those things. And when I got sober and when I started to really dig in, I realized that it was because God had a plan for me that was far greater than anything I could have ever conceived of. And he continues to prove that to me all the time. Even when I'm like so far away from myself and from God, he reminds me of how all this work, all this effort that I've gone into to cultivate this sense of myself and also myself as a person of faith, right? And so it didn't happen overnight, and there wasn't like this blinding lightning bolt and I went, oh, and I believe and everything's great and my life's perfect, right? I know that there are people who've had those kinds of amazing experiences, but mine was a very slow and kind of steady path, if you will. And one of the things I really love to share with you tonight is that, you know, you don't have to be an alcoholic to find God, right? And you don't have to be an addict to find God, but God lives in you. He lives deep in your heart. You are where he lives. And being a single mom, I was a single mom for, I just got married a year ago. So being a single mom for a big chunk of my kid's life. And I made a lot of mistakes during that time. I dated a man who ended up being abusive and dangerous because I had I was having so much trouble valuing myself as the only member of my family who was divorced, and this poor pitiful Gail, and she can't get it right. And, you know, the messages were just so overwhelming that it seemed easier to do that, to slip into something that was comfortable and familiar, being around someone who didn't make me stretch and didn't make me, you know, look at my life differently. And so the beautiful news was, one day my daughter looked at me while I was dating this person, and she said, she was old enough, she was 16, and she said, Mom, I have to tell you that if you do not walk away from this, I am going to go and live with Dad. I can't stand to watch this happen to you. Wow. And here I was, a celebrated teacher, the most successful swimming coach in Springfield High School's history. And my 16-year-old brought me to my knees and told me what I needed to hear. And in that moment, I knew that I needed to get on my knees and I needed to get back into Gail and back into my recovery and back into my faith, right? And thank you, God, that I didn't end up dead at the hands of this individual. I'm very lucky today. And I have PTSD that I continue to work around that. But I will tell you guys that a good therapist and amazing friends and a healing opportunity like you have here at church, you know, I didn't have a church community. I was a little jaded about that. And so I use the recovery community as my church, if you will. That's where I found God, in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, in the people and the faces and their stories and their bravery and their willingness to keep showing back up, right? And I hear so many beautiful things. Jessica doesn't ever talk about any of you individually, but she has shared with me what an amazing group of people you are. And I think it's a really difficult job to raise children on your own or in concert with someone else who you may or may not be on the same page with, or that person is completely absent from your child's life and you have to fill both roles. I had to do that for a while. My ex was so angry with me. He didn't come around the kids. And so our children, our adult children today are both working with therapists to heal some of the wounds from that trauma of our divorce and the choices that we made. But you guys, the most important thing that I can tell you tonight is stay the course and dig into your faith, because your faith will ground you always. It will always ground you. There's always solace in that. But the other side of this is, and I don't want to sound like a downer, but there's work to do independently to cultivate that faith, if it makes sense. It's not enough to say that I believe, it's that I have to do the work, because faith without works is nothing. It's dead, if you will, right? So the thing that I would really like to help you guys, well, that came out bad. Sorry, my daughter hit a deer this afternoon and she was hysterical. Nothing like this had ever happened to her before. And I had sat on the phone with her and walked her through everything. And then she just started texting me and it started showing up on my computer screen. So I apologize. I got super distracted for a moment and I lost my train of thought, but I'm old, so that can happen anyway. Yeah. So yes, Jess and I were talking about anger, and we were talking about faith, and we were talking about, like, how do you hold those two things together? Because you know what, guys, you can get angry at God. God can hold that. He can hold that space for you, and he can let you be angry with him for whatever it is that you're dealing with. And what I mean by that is, maybe you're upset because what's happened with that person you were involved with, and maybe you're disappointed because now you're having to bear this burden all by yourself, and it's a huge burden, and it comes at a tremendous cost, right? But when we start to look at ourselves, we hold up the mirror, right? And I start to really look at, so what is my part in this situation? Where was I self-serving? Where was I jealous? Where was I hypercritical? Where was I judgmental? Where was I controlling? You know, we start to kind of pull apart these pieces, our part, if you will, right? And examine them and then say, oh, wow, I was a very controlling person. I have to work on this every single day. And I never let my ex-husband have agency. I never let him, I let him talk, but then I do what I wanted anyway. It was very disrespectful, right? And so I really had to examine that character defect, if you will. And my anger towards him was truly anger that I had about myself. When I started to just examine all these different kind of, if you will, character defects. That's what we call them in the recovery world. And I don't want you to think that you're defective, because you're not. That they're actually they're defects when they're maladaptive, but they are your greatest blessings when you know what they are and how to work with them. So being controlling, right, can also mean that you are able to be calm and focused in the face of a difficult situation or a crisis. And so learning how to, first of all, identify what are those things about me that might make, that might be standing in the way of me and my relationships and my faith. That's a big deal, right? And so when I'm resentful, that's the word I was looking for. Any of you ever feel resentful towards the person that you were involved with or married to or unraveling yourself from currently? Guess what? That's okay. When it's not okay is when it's what fuels you. If your anger and your frustration, if that's the constant story, then it's time to take a look at yourself, right? I'm resentful at him because he never pays attention to me. I'm resentful because we split up. I'm resentful because he had an affair. I'm resentful because somebody might get a better job than me, because I'm a single mom and I can't do all the things that everybody expects people to do, right? So when we start to dig into our resentments, what are they affecting? Are they affecting my personal relationships? Are they affecting my work relationships? Are they affecting my ability to have security? Are they affecting my self-esteem? And ladies, I learned this through the recovery world, right? But the thing is, it helps everybody. You don't have to be an alcoholic or an addict to have these kinds of things help you. And so as I started to dig into my resentments, I just started making a list. Everybody I was angry with, and holy cow, that list was long. But you know who I was the most angry with? I know you all know the answer to this already. The person I was the most angry with was myself. Because when I started to examine those resentments, and then I started to look at myself, I realized that part of the problem was what I was doing, or even more so, what I wasn't doing. Not using my voice to say what I needed, not asking for help when I needed help. Anybody familiar with that martyr kind of syndrome or complex, right? I got this, I'm fine, leave me alone, right? That is, oh my gosh, whoo, that hurt my chest just to say that out loud. Like, to let that go and ask someone for help or tell someone that I'm struggling, God forbid, right? And so learning about what I was angry at or about, people, places, things, institutions, and you know what? I was mad at my kids too, because sometimes that was hard work. Being a single parent and struggling financially and trying to make things work and dating someone that was horribly controlling, emotionally abusive, and in the end, physically abusive, that's a lot to juggle for one person. Any day of the week, any one of those things, right, are difficult. And so in order for me to get to where I could have some peace, I had to really examine those resentments. And then I had to look at my part. And oftentimes when I was resentful, I had a part in that, right? Maybe it was I was too controlling, or maybe it was I was acting insecure, or maybe it was because I was being jealous. And then I realized through, the steps of AA that the next part of that was I was going to have to say I was sorry for the things that I had done. And let me tell you something. Perfectionistic, controlling people like me don't like to say they're sorry. It's hard work and it's humbling, but it is the most healing piece of work that I have ever done in my life, to sit with my ex-husband and tell him why I was sorry. Was the most terrifying and healing thing that ever happened. And I didn't want an apology from him. I just knew that I needed to clean up my side of the street so that I could free my heart to be open to more love and to more acceptance and to more patience and understanding. And he accepted my apology. And I didn't know if he would or not. And he even said, you don't need to go into the details. The fact that you're apologizing is enough. And he was able to say he was sorry too, because believe me, he had a huge part in the downfall of our marriage as well. I definitely needed to, I had a lot of resentments, obviously, towards the man I was with for 8 years, and all of that. In the end, though, it became apparent and very important that I stayed physically and emotionally safe. So being able to apologize to him for my part in our relationship was not possible. And I was led to that through therapy and great friends and guidance to not, part of being, part of loving ourselves and taking care of ourselves also means not putting ourselves in any harm, anywhere, any way, shape, any shape or form of harm. And he dropped dead 2 years ago. And so I was never able to make any amends to him. But I know that when I'm ready, I will. I'm still very scarred by that situation. But I guess my reason for sharing like this is that the more you can learn to forgive yourself and forgive others, the more room in your heart you will have for all the beauty and the joy that will continue to come your way. And because of that, I was able to eventually, through a lot of work with a therapist after the end of that relationship 7-8 years ago, I was able to come to terms with why I did some of the things that I did, and what I needed to change about myself in order to be able to accept love in my heart and to have a deeper faith. Because God continued to show me that no matter how dangerous I made it for myself, I was going to he was going to get me to the other side of that. I was not going to succumb to these incredibly challenging things that came into my life. And, forgiveness is the key to happiness. That seems like a really pat phrase, but having learned how to ask for forgiveness, in humbling myself at the feet of people that I had harmed and hurt, allowed that anger to leave my body. I am still learning how to forgive myself. That is a day-to-day process, because when you have amassed as many years as I have and done, the damage, if you will, of the things in my past, and my children who are young adults, they were affected by my choices, and they were affected even though I was trying, right? And so today I'm watching them sort of struggle with some of the stuff that they were exposed to. And all that makes me as a human being, and that makes my stomach hurt when I talk about it, but it's the truth. And the truth will always set you free, and God knows exactly what's happened in my life, and he continues to show me the way out. The deal is, though, if he's going to show me the way, I have to be willing to walk the path, right? And I have to be willing to listen. I have to be willing to get on my knees, and I have to be willing to be humble. And when I do something wrong, I have to say I'm sorry. And that's kind of the cornerstone of my life right now, is walking that path, steady and true, honoring the amazing life that God has laid out before me. Because I'm going to tell you guys, when I got sober at the age of 26, and I'm 56, 56, if you would have told me that this is how my life would have played out and how it is now, I would have laughed in your face, because I didn't even think I would probably be alive at this age, right? Because of where I was and what I had done and what I was doing to myself physically and psychologically. And so the way I demonstrate my love for God is how I take care of myself. Because this is just a vessel, right? This body is just a vessel, but this heart he gave me, and he has been, and I refer to God as he. That's just what I do. I know that other people have different ways of looking at that, calling it different things. But the Holy Spirit lives in me through people and through my ability to be present and to listen and to watch and to act. Action is I cannot express to you how deeply I feel about action, because I can think all the good thoughts, right? And I can say all the prayers, and I can, I can talk the talk, right? But if I don't walk the walk, it's all just a show. It's all just a show. And so getting in touch with yourself and finding some space in your heart for yourself by looking at those resentments, by looking at those things that hold you back, right? By being willing to ask for help, no matter what kind of help it is, financial help, spiritual help, psychological help. There's nothing wrong with any of that. You were not put on this earth to survive solo. Human beings are hardwired for connection, belonging, value. There is a plethora of research to back that up. The difference is we're not hardwired for how to do that. And so we bring things to our relationships, female, male relationships. We bring baggage, right, guys? We all do. It's because of the way, whatever we were raised with. I call it conditioning instead of baggage. I've tried to shift. You know, my parents, I've forgiven my parents, and my parents are both sober now. And my parents have, my mother at least has, she has apologized to me. She made amends to me for not being the mother that I needed as a very highly inquisitive and passionate child. And these are all these little gifts you get when you start to open your heart and start to look inside. And my faith exploded as a result, because there was room in my heart, if that makes any sense. I had room in my heart to welcome the good that God continued to show me every day if my eyes were open and I was willing to take action, right? Faith without works is dead. If you can remember anything from what I'm saying, and I know I'm like, I don't prepare when I talk, because if I type things out and do all that, that's not me. And Jessica knows that. I am better if I can just, you know, kind of free flow and talk my truth. And so resentment, you guys, is the #1 offender. Anybody familiar with scorekeeping? Like, well, I did this and I did that. And I did it with my kid. Anybody ever do it with your kids? I do it with kids too, right? So these are ways we when we scorekeep, we build up resentments, because it's saying, well, what I'm doing, look at me. I'm doing it all, right? But the thing is, we're all just bozos on the bus trying to find our way. That's all we're doing, right? We're all, as my favorite poet has said, and my dog's name, Rumi, we're all just walking each other home. And whatever that means, right? Whatever that means, if it means I'm walking you to that next step to help you dig through your resentments and find some forgiveness in your heart, or it means I'm walking the path with you because you're really sick and you need support, whatever it is, right? We're all just walking each other home. We're all just human beings on this planet trying to do the best we can one day at a time. And the only thing we ever get is one day at a time. We're not promised tomorrow. And as my husband, God bless him, he is a saint for marrying me and dealing with me. And he just walked in the door, so I'm going to shut my door. Hi, honey, I love you. He just got home from work, poor guy. He said, Gail, God put eyes in the front of your head for a reason, because I tend to get trapped in what if, why didn't, if only, and I don't know if that resonates with any of you guys. And guess what? It doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter that I didn't do every single thing right when Cassidy and Peyton were middle schoolers and high schoolers and even college kids, or even right now, for that matter. It doesn't matter that my ex and I did all the damage that we did to each other. What matters is that we take responsibility for it and we take action to amend it, so that we can open our heart. So that, I mean, that was my prayer for so long. God, just help me move some of this crud out of myself so that I can be open and willing to do your work, you know? And every one of us is put here for a reason. And it doesn't have to be to write the greatest memoir or, become rich and all these things. It's about showing up. I believe that right now my job is to show up for people, to show up, to hold space. And that's good enough. And if that's what someone says on the day that I die, that, well, she just was really present for people and held space, well, then I think I fulfilled my purpose. Because don't we all need someone to hold a little space for us, especially when life is difficult? It'd be amazing, right? So I know I've kind of been all over the place. So let me try to kind of sum up some things. And Jess, is it okay if I let them ask me questions before you guys go in and do your thing, or would you prefer not to do that? I'm okay with whatever you guys want to do.
No, absolutely. That's absolutely fine.
Okay. So just kind of in summary is, I know where you are. I've been in your shoes. I think it's amazing that you show up for a group like this, because what that says is you're trying to take some action, right? You're trying to move some space in your heart. And so I would really encourage you guys to be willing to examine, those things that you're angry about or that you might be holding in your heart. And let me tell you something. God is okay with you being mad. He is. He can handle it. That guy can handle anything, right? What he doesn't want you to do, or at least this is my belief, is he doesn't want you to carry that around like a huge backpack with rocks for the rest of your life. He wants you to come to terms with it, to be able to do the forgiving that you need to do, and then release that so that you are open and able for him to rush in and fill you up with whatever it is. And I can tell you guys that doing the work does release space, because probably in the last 7 years, I have known and experienced true and utter joy. And it is over the most minute things. The way the moon is sitting in the sky, the incredible colors of a sunrise, the blue heron that I see occasionally on the pond in our neighborhood. By cultivating that space in my heart, I'm able to see God's world so much more beautifully and brightly and differently. And because of that, I am so much more happy and at peace. And I want that for all of you, even though I don't even hardly know any of you. Because I know what it's like. I wanted to make sure I told you my story because, I am married now, but I was not married for 14 years, for the biggest chunk of my raising my children. And I know what it's like to struggle financially and to overcompensate because you didn't want your kid to miss out on something because all the other kids had moms and dads and had plenty of money and things like that. And I made lots and lots of mistakes, but I showed up in my life. And that's all we can do right now, especially right now, because right now is crazy. So I think by recognizing and just admitting that you may have some anger, you may have resentments, it's okay. It doesn't mean you don't have faith. It means you're a human being experiencing human emotions. And by giving yourself the space to own that and then work through that resentment and work through that anger with someone that you trust implicitly, and then examining kind of, ooh, wow, I'm kind of controlling, or ooh, wow, I need to do some work on my self-esteem, or oh gosh, I've always looked to someone else. These are all my things, none of yours. These are mine. I've looked to someone, I'm just saying, I don't want to assume, you know what I mean? But I looked to other people. Oh gosh, I looked to other people to provide me security because I didn't have enough faith in myself to provide that security for me, if that makes sense. That sounded really jumbled. So the work is on us. God asks us to have faith, but he also asks us to do the work. And when we do the work, we make all this space in our hearts for all this amazing stuff. And we get to shed those things we no longer need. We get to let them go. We get to leave them behind. And we get to move on. And I will tell you that I am married to a man that I would never have looked twice at on the street 25 years ago. Never. And I have never in my life been in such an authentic, honest, loyal, caring relationship. And I still have to work through that all the time with my background, right? And realize that he's the real deal. And I'm not saying that there's a man at the end of the rainbow or anything like that, because that's I was never looking for that. But I guess my point is that because I did the work and I continue to do the work. This is not I did it and it's over. Make sure I say that. My heart was open to better and different things. And that has been the greatest gift of all. I have friends that I would never have imagined would have been friends, right? And I mean, my best friend is 36 years old. That's the craziest thing. I'm old enough to be her mother. She's my best friend in the whole wide world. And I'm just so grateful, right? And none of this would have been possible if I did not believe in a power greater than myself and his ability to heal me and to heal those around me and to continue to do the work. Sorry, my dog was like running and I was like, whoa, I get distracted easily. Jessica knows this. And then I'm like, ooh, squirrel. So I apologize for that. But I would be happy to thank you, first of all. Thank you for having me and letting me just speak to you from my heart. I'm more than happy to answer questions or, okay, I did have a question. Someone sent me a question. So is it okay if I address the question to the group in general?
Is it from Janelle?
No, it's from Sarah.
Oh, Sarah. That's up to Sarah.
Yeah,
Sarah is our care group leader here at Hope Church.
Awesome.
She's teaching me everything I need to know, Miss Gail.
Oh, that's amazing.
Very blessed to have her in our team.
Yay. So the question is, what if the resentment is to God? Great question. And guess what? I've worked through that too. I think that a lot of us, and I don't mean us, I just mean collective, like in the collective, right, of the world, there's a lot of people who are probably have anger towards God or a resentment towards God for a specific incident or maybe something in general. And so I guess what my thought would be on this would be, I'm resentful at God, okay? What's the cause of that? And then writing down the cause of why you would be resentful towards God. And then what does that affect? Does that affect my personal relationships? Does that affect my security, my self-esteem, my sexual relationships? You know what I mean? Like, what does it affect? My pride, my ego, that kind of thing. And so I think it's important to not be afraid to be angry at God either, because I believe that God can handle that. And we're not being authentic if we don't say, you know, I mean, I had plenty of times I'm like, my 19-year-old niece, Jessica knows because she was the first person I told at school. My 19-year-old niece went to the emergency room in February with flu symptoms, and 24 hours later, we found out she had an aggressive form of leukemia. And I was furious. How is this beautiful, intelligent, amazing young lady being given this sentence today? I was not a happy camper, and God was part of that not a happy camper part. But then I realized, you know, part of my anger was my fear. I was afraid. That was the cause. I was afraid that he would take her from us, right? But that was fear speaking. And I was afraid for my sister and my brother-in-law and for all the rest of us. But then I knew there's a reason why this is happening. This isn't about me. I don't get to be angry at God about this right now. I'm afraid. And at the root of that was my fear. So when I started breaking it down, why was I angry? It was that I was afraid that I was going to lose my only niece, this beautiful, amazing, brilliant, off the charts human being. And I needed to hold space for myself, right? Because most often, you guys, for me, underneath my anger is tremendous debilitating fear. Fear that I'll be alone. Fear that I won't be able to do the right thing. Fear that everything's going to fall apart. Fear that I'm not going to be able to pay the bills. Underneath my anger was always this unbelievable undercurrent of fear. And it's still that way. When I get angry, I have to stop and take a deep breath and say, what is going on here? What is this about? And so, one, I think it's perfectly okay to be resentful towards God. Two, I don't think you should go through your whole life like that. I think that's very unhealthy. Three, I think examine it. What is it that I'm angry about? I'm angry because I lost my job, or I'm angry because so-and-so spoke rudely to me. I'm angry because my niece has leukemia. I'm angry because my poor husband is working 15 hours a day in this pandemic. What is it? And then what does that affect? Does that answer the question?
I think so. I think I have a more specific question though, Gail.
Okay.
No, she can hear. Oh, Sarah. Hi, Sarah. When the anger is based because we've already lost that person that was our mate, our father to our children. How can we work through that? Because that anger, I feel, is so much more deeper than the fear of losing, because they've already been lost.
That's a really, really good question, Jess, and also a good point. And remember, I'm not a therapist. I just want to make sure I qualify. I'm a behaviorist, but I'm not a therapist. So here's kind of my 10 cents on when someone has lost someone, like to death, is what I'm guessing you're referring to, Jess. Right? That's grief. That's grief. And the cycle of grief is denial, anger, sadness, acceptance. And I think sometimes people mislead others, or at least this has been my experience, that it's this cycle. Okay, well now I'm sad, so now I'm going to be okay. And the thing is, grief is linear. It's like anything, right? You can grieve something for a very long time. It's just, I think the intensity of it tends to wax and wane. There are going to be things that would trigger that grief that might lead you to be angry. But I think when we can sit with ourselves and kind of, I'm a big fan of holding my heart. I'm a long-term meditation practitioner, and the teacher that I'm working with now, she's very big about, holding yourself here and just saying, I'm really angry you're gone. I'm really sad you're gone, or I'm really frustrated because this is really hard, right? And so that allowing yourself to be present in whatever those feelings are is, in my experience, it's the best way to move through them. To sit with yourself and say, oh my God, this hurts so, I'm getting a little emotional, but this hurts. Like, I've had to sit with this. I have grief about how sick my niece is, right? And I know that's not the same thing as losing someone, but allowing myself to acknowledge how angry I am about that, or how sad I am. When we sit with our feelings, even though they are so unbelievably uncomfortable, when we sit with them and we say, hey, hi, I hear you. I hear that anger. I feel that anger in you, okay? It's okay. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel this way right now. And when we give ourselves permission to feel whatever that is, it tends to rise and fall. It's when we stuff it and don't want to accept it or deal with it, because it's hard, right? Who wants to sit and be really sad, or who wants to be really angry? I don't do anger well. I learned I had really bad modeling about anger. And so I've had to learn how to, when I feel it, I have a Nerf bat in my basement and an old couch, and I go down there and I pound on it, because then I can let it go. right? And then I don't yell and scream at someone else, or I don't yell and scream at God, or I might be yelling and screaming while I'm doing it, but then it's gone, and it's gone quickly. And so I think just culturally, we don't allow ourselves to feel our feelings. And then we want people to get over stuff. And we think that we should all be done with things. And guess what? We're not. I'm still grieving some things from my childhood that I didn't get to have, and not like that. That sounds kind of weird. But my point is I'm still grieving some things from this whole course of my life. But when I can call it what it is, right? Sitting with it, allowing ourselves to be angry and not being afraid of it, and knowing that we're not wrong by having those feelings. They're just feelings, and they come and go. They're not facts. They're just feelings.
I really do appreciate the technique of sitting in that emotion and doing something.
Yes. Self-talk positively. I have to sit with myself a lot. I still struggle with a lot of things just like everybody else. And even tonight before this, I was in the kitchen getting some things ready for dinner, and I'm like, it's okay. You're anxious. It's okay. Sweet. And I always had a harsh inner critic. I don't know if anybody can resonate with that or not, but harsh. I mean, brutal. I would never speak to someone the way I've spoken to myself for a long. So the thing that I've really been working on this year, because there's a lot more space and time to do this now since I'm home all the time, is to really say, it's okay. It's okay, sweetie. You get to be anxious. This is important work, talking to people and sharing your story and, being present. And just stopping. When you have a big feeling, if you can stop and just give yourself some space and say, I'm extremely overwhelmed right now. It doesn't make you bad and wrong. Our culture tells us not to feel. And that's what's made us so sick as a culture. And to me, that's what stands in the way too, a lot of times of my ability to connect with my faith. Because if I'm stuffing all that stuff down, my heart can't be open.
Yeah. And I feel like that's important for us as mothers that we're learning that skill on our own to then share that with our children.
Yes. Modeling that for your children, you guys, the healing and the social emotional skills that you will give them by doing that, you will set them up to be far more emotionally intelligent as they mature. And as I don't know about you guys, but I'm a fixer. I work on that all the time, and when our kids are uncomfortable or unhappy or they're sad or they're grieving, we have a tendency to want to fix that, right? And that's a natural motherly instinct. But the other side of it is, what if we just sat with them and let them cry because they're sad, because they miss their dad, or they are sad about missing their friends from school right now? What if we just sat with them and let them have that? Because what you're teaching them is that their feelings are important, and processing them is important too. I wish I would have known this when my kids were younger. I would have done a better job. But I'm working with them now as young adults on it. So, progress, not perfection. That's the story of life, right?
I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you talking to us. I am just blown away by you every time.
I love you. You know that. You're amazing too. I would be, Jess, if anybody wants to reach out privately or would, please share my phone number. I'm more than I think that support is critical, and I know you guys are getting amazing support here. I'm just another person who would be happy to help in any way that I can.
I appreciate that.
No problem.
Does anyone have any other questions for Gail? Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me and letting me tell my crazy story.
Thank you for sharing your story. Sometimes that's the most important thing about when someone speaks to us, is sharing their story.
Well, That's how we connect, right? Like,
yeah, that's how we connect, how we show our vulnerability, and we build that trust within each.
oh, yes, my dear, you are exactly right. And I am a big fan of sharing those, I mean, sharing my story. I have nothing to be ashamed of anymore. If it helps somebody, it connects with somebody. And you guys all have amazing, beautiful stories to share too. And you, by the work that you're doing, by showing up here, you're cultivating and making space for others along the way. So thank you for what you're doing for yourselves too. And I hope you all stay well and be safe. And I just enjoyed my time here so much this evening.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Be well.
Thank you. So, Janelle and Sarah, we're going to kind of just decompress and